Hello, everyone. Welcome to the University of the Underground. We are a free, pluralistic university and charity founded in 2017 in Amsterdam, actually in the basement of a nightclub. I am Naum, the head of program I Want to Believe, an investigation into religion and belief systems and how they have an impact in politics, economics, and society. I would like to welcome our researchers and also to any visiting participants or anyone else watching this session. I would like to kindly ask you to support us and donate anything that you can so we can keep doing these programs. Today, we will have a 40-minute talk followed by a 15-minute Q&A with our special guest. So I would like to present Fabrizio Cocchiarella, who happens to be a designer, lecturer, and researcher at Manchester School of Art in the UK. His practice investigates new approaches to design that contribute to innovating and shaping future scenarios for the designed environment. In the same way that paranormal means phenomena which occur outside of normal understanding defined by current scientific thinking, paradesign occurs outside of normal design parameters. So today, Fabrizio is going to share with us more about what is this paradesign. So Fabrizio, stage is yours.
Thanks, Nam. Thanks. Right. Well, everyone, hello. Nice to meet you all. I'm going to share screen, and then I'll give you an overview of the subject area of paradesign and how I'm focusing around this in my research. So just a moment. I'll share. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. Good. Fantastic. Right. So, my name is Fabrizio Cocchiarella, and I'm a designer, educator, and researcher at Manchester School of Art. My practice-based research through design investigates human behaviour and relationships between location-based phenomena, environmental qualities, and more recently, through the study of paranormal belief. I do this through designed objects, spatial interventions, and pedagogic projects that are used as tools to test and explore perceptual experiences of a larger reality. Projects generally explore the territory between ontology, the way we make sense of being, phenomenology, the way we read our environment, and psychogeography, the way we translate space and find meaning in the design of places. So we've all probably seen this image. It's been just over 100 years since the Bauhaus, and a design education that radically rethinks culture. It really is time, I think, that design as a practice dealt with the issues of, as the Bauhaus put it, shaping human existence in modern times. And after the inputs you've had through this program in rethinking the archetypes that condition and our understanding of the world, I think it's really clear it's an exciting time for creatives to remodel our possible future contexts. So for me, in understanding the context of positioning reality, it's been important to study perceptual experiences and the way people ascertain fact from fiction, which presents new challenges, I think, for design to look beyond what is perceived as normal and perhaps explore the realms of fantasy rationale as a way to design new meaning, behaviours and environments. Because after all, we all understand our experience with the world differently, which is filtered by what we believe, what we would like to believe, and what we feel is truly real. The project here is called Liminal Ladder and investigates the psychospatial encounter as termed by Carl Jung, when objects become interfaces between the imaginary and the real. This has been exhibited in a few places from Manchester to the Slovene Design Museum as part of a show entitled Seamless, the Digital in Design. Now, in the book Fitness for What Purpose, there's an essay entitled A Larger Reality where Anthony Dunn talks about the marketization of every aspect of life. He talks about how the current economic system, whilst generating vast wealth, has failed to ensure fair distribution, and asks the question, what if our approach to design and design education is wrong? What if making real stuff perpetuates everything that is wrong with the current reality, which means all possible futures are extrapolations of a dysfunctional present? I'm investigating the potential for design research to explore how to emotionally engineer the built environment and as an interface from which to explore a paranormality and ways of unconventional thinking, innovative thinking, outside of normal parameters, away from the dysfunctional present. I've started a journey through a practice-based PhD to define what I've termed paradesign, which utilizes psychical research as a lens from which to reinvent design scenarios that explore the phenomenology of experience. So paradesign is a word used to define what I hope will be an emerging field in design that draws its inspiration from parapsychology and operates on the borders or periphery of common design practices. Para also means for or alongside. In the same way that paranormal means phenomena which occur outside of normal understanding defined by current scientific thinking. Paradesign means design that occurs outside of normal design parameters. It's an approach to thinking beyond constraints and notions of what is real. It explores belief and how we consider the analytical, the rational, and experiential, emotional factors that affect perceptions of the physical world in which we live. So paradesign is a form of social research that translates critical aesthetic experience into fictions that are assimilated into a world of ideas rather than market-led objectives. So through conceptual models for shaping reality, desire, and fantasy, exploring critical and aesthetic roles for design, using estrangement to open space for critical discussion, and exploring the link between people's mental lives and their lived experience through the design of their environment. So perhaps this forms a psychodynamic approach to design. The psychodynamic approach includes all the theories in psychology that see human functioning based upon the interaction of drives and forces within the person, particularly the unconscious, and between the different structures of the personality. So Freud's psychoanalysis is both a theory and a therapy. So in reference to the paranormal, in this context refers to a proposition that is generated within the non-scientific community and extensively endorsed by people who might normally be expected by their society to be capable of rational thought and reality testing. This is a quote from Irwin, a psychologist, from the Psychology of the Paranormal, a researcher's handbook. Now, perhaps as humans become more disconnected from collectiveness, metaphysical fascinations follow the archetypes of modern fantasy. The UFO, ghosts, supernatural powers, psychic phenomena, and experience of telepathic connection could be the manifestation of visionary dreams that deal with conflicting traumatic issues in the self and in relationship to lived experience. In the book Flying Saucers, a modern myth of things seen in the sky, Carl Jung talks about UFO phenomena emerging in the 50s as the experience of a growing psychic disturbance. In confusing times of fake news and fake truths, I think it seems pertinent that people in all societies look for comfort in these symbolic visionary rumours. So through a series of designed objects and by interrogating the way we perceive paranormal phenomena, research aims to investigate experiences that are triggered by spatial characteristics that influence our behaviour and perceptions through reality testing, investigating the sense of self and experience of space. The images here on the top left is ufologist Jenny Randalls did a really amazing talk in a local UFO enthusiast symposium in just outside of Blackpool about the misperception and how we see with our mind and make sense of things based on current popular rationale. The UFO clouds here, they're a natural phenomena, but can be viewed as otherworldly depending on the context and atmospheric conditions. The weather can present unusual patterns that, when rationalized in a human context, can become visceral fantasy experiences. When we take these iconic symbols and start to materialize these fantasies into real places, perhaps we have the opportunity to literally live the dream. And, you know, as seen in bottom right, the image of the iconic Futura house being transported in the late 70s through the main street in Todmorden in the UK. This was a vision for the future of housing.
Whoa, what's up, mate? Shooting star, bro.
Wow, man. So this is a clip that went viral on Facebook. Was it really a shooting star or a UFO? I'm fascinated by people's interpretation of what life is about, and there seems to be a desire to look beyond and think beyond, to dream beyond and imagine what if. And as a designer, learning to immerse yourself in this way through perhaps cognitive empathic engagement can be really useful in understanding not just the context, but the people who live with the reality you're investigating. All through this idea of a transpersonal anthropology. There's a para-anthropologist, Jack Hunter, puts it, living to see as the natives see. Jack Hunter's a really interesting character. He's an anthropologist fascinated by the paranormal and a Buddhist monk from the Big Lebowski. The image top left is a field near Rome one summer. I stayed with a self-sufficient community, spending the summer farming, talking about spirituality and searching for UFOs. There was a lot of UFO activity at the time, and we would get calls reporting sightings from the local community of experts, and would drive to remote locations to inspect crop circles and debate whether we thought they were real or not. We often were divided, analysing the physical characteristics of sites. These were exciting trips that felt as though you were on the verge of discovery. So from Rome to the Calder Valley and the town I now live in called Todmorden, which is also known as UFO Alley, the birthplace of the Futura House, incidentally has the highest UFO sightings in Europe. This is a vibrant local community dedicated to surveying the skies, coordinated by the brilliant Colin, who runs the local bookshop, and the local UFO group that meet once a month in the Golden Lion pub to discuss their alien encounters, sightings, and abduction experiences. Some of you may have heard of P.C. Alan Godfrey. He's recently written a book about his experiences, which is soon to be made into a film. If you want to find out more, you can see an episode of 90s supernatural TV show Strange But True that broadcast a reconstruction of his experience. It's interesting how mindsets change and how the media certainly changes what we focus on. Through the 80s and 90s, it wasn't unusual to see events of the paranormal reported in the media almost daily. It was in our cultural mindset. Reports of local poltergeist in Salford in Manchester, for example, or the Vendlesham Forest UFO mystery, and the UFO cases reported across the Pennines at the time of the case of Alan Godfrey. It makes you wonder, actually, what else was going on in the world? What are we talking about, and what should we be talking about? Are we being invaded by aliens, or is something going on politically that needs a little less attention? I'm sure if you look back in the history books, there were plenty of things going on at that time that governments would prefer weren't in the media spotlight. But then we get into conspiracy. But away from conspiracy for now, because we could go on for ages on that topic, and investigating this collective mindset and how communities can transform through the power of rumour and belief. Derren Brown, a few years ago, did a series called The Experiments. Some of you may have seen it, and a particular episode called The Secrets of Luck, where he embedded rumours in a small Yorkshire town, again Todmorden, that if you stroke the lucky dog, pictured in the picture here in Centreville Park, you will have good luck. And over a period of a few weeks, the dog became the town's local legend. People reported winning the lottery. People started to talk about the lucky things that happened to them after touching the dog. At the end of the episode, Derren congregated the community in the town hall and managed to convince the local butcher to gamble his entire life savings on the roll of a dice. And he won. Derren talked about luck being infectious through rumours, but the opposite is also true. It's interesting when our beliefs start to change our behaviours and we start to see the world in new ways. Perhaps more recently, as we start to debate our belief systems, an exploration of paranormal phenomena in relation to current political, geographic tensions is a useful way from which to measure, the psychological state of our communities and our society. The opportunity to perhaps realign our philosophical priorities. Some might say we're experiencing a paradigm shift from materialism to the matter of mind. And I'm sure other people have been talking about this more recently. So through exploring these kind of metaphysical experiences and paranormal interventions, could we start to view the designed world in terms of the psyche and perhaps the role of the psychic product and how it is manifested and how it is encountered. In the last few years, we've all experienced a shift in geopolitical powers, and some would argue a reorganization towards an inward-looking nationalism. Phenomena like Brexit illustrates how communities may detach and isolate themselves in their own constructed bubble and confirmation bias. But perhaps we need to be aware of and mindful of our independence and identities beyond, or being founded on hopes, dreams, and perhaps fantasy rationale. So in working out confusing times, it's important that we communicate, we debate and remain open-minded. In Manchester, we have a parapsychology society, which helps to facilitate this important debate. For a few years, we've been investigating locations, watching films, studying paranormal phenomena, hosting talks with scientists, academics, and experts in their field, from well-known parapsychologists, neuroscientists, clinical psychologists, to spiritualist mediums who also talk to people in the room who no one else can see. So this discussion has helped to build a network of like-minded inquisitors, open to exploring the boundaries of their disciplines, and through collaborative investigations has led to interesting creative projects as opportunities to explore these theories in real contexts. An example is with the Oldham Coliseum Theatre. They have a resident ghost called Harold Norman. He was an actor that sadly died on stage in 1946. He was killed while rehearsing Macbeth, or as they say in the theatre, the Scottish play, because it's considered very bad luck to say Macbeth in the theatre. The theatre were interested in bottling their ghost and transporting him to the new theatre they had some funding for down the road. They were really excited to move location, but didn't want to leave Harold behind. He's part of the theatre and their identity. So the project is more than just about the ghost. It's about community, place, and heritage. Through design, the aim is to transport these qualities of the ghost through an object or interventions that become essential to the identity of the place and value to the community. So I embarked on a process of research in the early stages of the project to investigate the history of sightings and encounters with Harold in the theatre space through accounts from a local expert and eyewitness testimonies. And from this research, it's been possible to correlate experiences with locations within the architecture of the building. The challenge for the project is to design a vessel to capture the ghost, perhaps involving a performance or ritual or to transport it to the new location, and an intervention or installation, an experience of the phenomena in its new location. So designing the essence of the ghost and associated perceptive experiences will draw on knowledge gained from previous studies. So in an effort to understand this kind of phenomenology of the paranormal through objects, space and artifacts and ritual practices, I visited the research centre at the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic in Boscastle in Cornwall. For those of you that don't know about it, it's a really beautiful place to visit. So through talking with the curators who allowed me to use their archives for preliminary research, I gained insight into the occult belief, or what occult belief means to people, and the rich heritage and practice of magic through the design of ritual objects that channel and communicate with esoteric forces. So this investigation through the museum artifacts and library archives helped to imagine how the intangibility of belief maps onto the use of objects framed by ritual spaces. I was able to immerse myself in the extraordinary labyrinth of artifacts and the largest public library of occult publications. The collection ranged from historic pagan ritual tools and artifacts to wax body parts used to heal related parts of the body, and also more modern interpretations of spiritualist and ritual objects through games like Ouija boards and contemporary voodoo dolls or puppets. When I was there, the new owners had just discovered one of Cecil Williamson's hidden witch bottles. Now, Cecil was a screenwriter and the original founder of the museum. Incidentally, Cecil's first iteration of the museum in Stratford-upon-Avon opened the year after Harold Norman died in 1947. Cecil was an eccentric character, a shaman and occultist, and managed to keep the museum secret from his wife and family until his death. Anyway, back to the witch bottles. So the curators were planning to open it that day while we were there in the library, but decided to wait until the museum was closed. And strangely, that was the last time I spoke to them both. Very mysterious. but different from Cecil's witch bottle. But an example of a witch bottle. This one is from Brighton around 1850, appeared in a collection at the Ashmolean Museum, and it was part of an exhibition called Spellbound, an exhibition tracing the history of ritual magic and witchcraft. Historically used to capture the spirit of witches, often thrown into lakes or buried deep below ground. They often utilised everyday vessels. However, this vessel has been specially silvered inside to capture and fascinate the witch. The poppet pictured in the centre here, much like the Beast of Baghdad, another poppet in the collection at Spellbound from 1909, was used to inflict injury or death. This sits alongside remains of animals that in the 17th century England were placed under the floor in grand houses to ward off evil spirits and witches. Now, these remains are referred to as sympathetic magic. Often cats and mice were thought to be familiars, essentially animals that take form as domestic pets, but are in fact demons or guardians to their immortal owners. And in 17th century England, houses often had problems with mice, rats, insects, and woodworms, so it wasn't uncommon for carcasses of cats and chickens to be placed in walls and under floors as scarecrows, placed in menacing positions to scare off woodworm and vermin infestations. But you zoom forward to the present day and you have an image of something we're perhaps more familiar with. Locks on a bridge symbolizing relationships and wishes. This modern ritual allows us to invest emotionally in powers that seem to elude science. Incidentally, Leeds City Council got into a lot of trouble causing a public outcry when it decided the padlocks on this bridge were undermining the structural safety. They cut off all the locks, which severed the magical bond people had with this location. So people felt they had been personally affected by the council's actions. Another example is this coin tree in Ingleton in North Yorkshire, embedding coins in the bark to bring good luck. So each coin is inserted with an emotional attachment. So rituals and customs are still very much part of our subconscious and the way we become fascinated with the world. So this isn't a culture of the past. Although we perhaps lived life differently in the 17th century, magical thinking is very much part of the present. It's just we perhaps manifest these beliefs in new ways through different forms. So again, back to the Spellbound exhibition, when talking about the history of magic, there was a mention of the dream sequence designed by Dali in an exhibition about Dali and film at the Tate Modern. The film was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. The set conveys a dream and illustrates the metaphysical space of the mind and its ability to think beyond natural laws. This freedom interpretation of everyday stereotypes plays out new scenarios for potential for real space. Imagine if the ceiling was watching you, that the building or interior was a living being. Perhaps that's not as bonkers as it sounds. The metaphors used in the film perhaps have modern day interpretations through CCTV, self-healing innovative materials, the Internet of Things embedded in every surface that monitors how we use and utilize the environment. Some of you may have seen this exhibition at the Wellcome Trust in London, a foundation for scientific research. Smoke and Mirrors, The Psychology of Magic, traces popular culture from 19th century mediumship, the occult and beliefs that shaped early scientific reasoning and how we understand reality. It looks at how magic has been used through various forms of entertainment as a way to understand how the mind perceives and believes. So what do we really see, and how, when presented with misdirection, the mind can be fooled into believing the illusion, a misinterpretation of the truth, perhaps. Parapsychologists from Goldsmith University presented a series of films about their experiments in understanding cognition and how the mind can be fooled by props, theatre, and suspension of belief by imagining and seeing the impossible. So magic here is an illusory experience where we experience something we thought was impossible. And interestingly, Bishop Bryan, in his talk on archetypal patterns and the building blocks of reality, which was brilliant, I must add. I think you've all been fast-tracked in terms of your perceptual awareness, kind of receiving that information. But he talked about modern science and its inability to truly analyze and deconstruct or investigate the true reality of things. And he talked about the dangers of dogma. Interestingly, Dr. Rupert Sheldrake talks about this too in his banned TED Talk, called The Science Delusion, that I put on your reading list. So it seems we really are in a state of unknowing as we try to grasp the purpose of it all and the way we get a grip on the physicality of how we wish to experience the world. And designers have it in their grasp to design how we experience it. So in investigating the supernatural, or however you prefer to refer to spirits, apparitions, ghosts, the anomalous, entities that haunt our darkened spaces and talk to us in our dreams and altered states, I've embarked on a project with a team of parapsychologists to investigate the science of human behaviour in relation to belief and examine relationships between environmental features, design and paranormal phenomena at various locations, but primarily Ordsall Hall in Salford in Manchester. Now, Ordsall Hall is a large former manor house dating back more than 820 years and well known for its ghosts and unusual phenomena. They have ghost cams where you can watch the spaces online for any unusual activity. We've invited the public to a series of events where participants take part in a scientific study to investigate reported sightings. The experiences on these evenings are always varied and incredibly interesting. I like that they become forums for people to safely talk about what they feel they have encountered and sensed. There is often a mix of skeptical minds and people who are actively seeking contact with the spirit world. And this creates interesting dialogue between participants and helps researchers establish triggers that cause these experiences. So whether environmental conditions or psychic triggers, it is inspired and underpinned by established parapsychological research in this area that evidently explains the plausible, but hopes to seek a new understanding through experiential situations. So whether reported direct experiences are true for all is not really the focus. The value of the research is to explore the many possible interpretations of phenomena. So current academic practices often insist on a reductionist approach to distill all experience down to a purely objective, quantitative physical process produced and understood in reference to the established laws of reference. This perspective reduces experience to purely physiological and often explains away unusual experiences as delusional. So a non-reductionist viewpoint is probably a lot healthier to open an opportunity for new insights, exploring how paranormal belief is perhaps mediated through the design of spatial scenarios that perhaps work beyond the plausible. After all, we don't want to miss really discovering something, do we, in these experiments? So it's important to rethink those measures that we're measuring against. So in this sense, design practice is an opportunity to adapt an experimental approach, merging science, so what we know or can attempt to measure and prove, and creative speculation, prediction and invention to investigate the opportunity to explore sense-making and translate perceptive experiences through what I like to refer to as design alchemy. So directing, analysing, materialising ideas into a physical form. So to investigate this further, I co-ran an investigative workshop to explore this new territory with psychologist Dr. Ken Drinkwater. We worked with product design students from Artes in the Netherlands on an expedition to investigate paranormal perception. Students explored locations and appraised environmental conditions and unusual experiences as part of a series of field tests that generated design proposals to produce what we call paranormal products. So these became the centerpiece of an exhibition where interaction with each product revealed diverse experiences and understandings. The combination of parapsychology and paradesign revealed how design can elicit and engineer these perceptive experiences. So on the first day of the workshop, students investigated notions of the paranormal through discussion and debate, looking at the psychology of the paranormal and how this translates through design of experiences. Students then used the afternoon to rapidly model ideas and experiential scenarios. Now, these prototype situations and devices were used to illustrate potential ways to filter perception. So through catching spirits in your periphery vision, and also a prototype for creating light and shadows, a device to listen to whispers from spirits, and exploring the focus of reflection into an obsidian surface, so creating a scrying device, which is a mediumship device. Scrying comes from the Old English word descry, which means to make out dimly or to reveal. So things can't usually be perceived to make out things that couldn't usually be perceived through the senses. So for the second day, we went on day trip and spent the morning at the 20th century Dutch academic parapsychology, spiritualism and mediumistic art collections. Gosh, that's a mouthful. I can't even begin to say that in Dutch. With psychologist Dr. Wim Kramer and assistant Lottie, they talked to the students about the archives and current research and explained how the archives had accumulated over the years, mostly through donations from the spiritualist community, and also demonstrated artifacts used to make contact with the spirit world. Now, these spiritual products gave valuable insights into the design of objects to communicate with the esoteric. So Wim in this video is demonstrating a Victorian device that signals when spirits are present during a seance. It was thought that at the time the spirits were present in the breeze or the drafts in the room, so this lightly weighted device would flutter in the movement of the air and light up to signal a presence. At our first haunted location, students employed field research using a spontaneous case approach. Now, parapsychologist Stephen Parsons recently wrote a field guide for the Society of Psychical Research in London on how to investigate spontaneous cases on location rather than in a lab. This method is concerned with data collection and verification, whilst also generating an ethnographic and observational data set. So specifically here, field research provided students a way of studying each location within its natural setting. And as designers, they were exploring and thinking through real experiences that they could later translate into design responses, simulating those experiences. The following day, after a morning of prototyping, we conducted another study at the nearby Panopticon prison, a fascinating building in the centre of Arnhem. The recently retired building was an excellent inspiration for investigating a different type of perceived haunted space. So through another building study, students were able to compare these perceptual experiences with the day before and analyse the different design languages employed in diverse places. So the Spiritualist building in Utrecht was a place to host seances and friendly contact with the spirit world, whereas Arnhem Panopticon prison was a place where paranormal phenomena occurred as a consequence of an oppressive environment. And we heard stories about cell 129 here, which stopped being used in the 20s as too many people died from mysterious circumstances in that particular cell, and it felt very strange. So back in the workshop, responding to the site visit with paranormal in our mindsets, and it's strange how you start to notice things differently. Things like religious iconography in the workshop and the tea break table with toilet roll and a suspicious knife scene. Heads in boxes trying to mock up and simulate experiences. And the atmosphere changes as tension builds in preparation for Anomalies, our exhibition event at the end of the week, where the group showcases their work to test to their peers. So through making, tests and conceptual mock-ups help to model experiences from the building study into objects of either simulated phenomena through light, through exploring cultural notions of superstition, or objects to act as conduits to these esoteric forces as proposals for new types of experimental products that connected the physical world with the psychological interpretation. So here we see the design identity of superstitious products, a device for always having wood to knock on to hand. So either for personal or shared use, to make sure you can make an experience as a fortunate one. A device to help prevent you unintentionally walking under ladders so you can avoid bad luck. And a kit to protect any vulnerable mirrors from breaking, inflicting unwanted misfortune. The mediumship hand here allows a medium to channel a spirit through a soft arm that comes to life when in contact with the receiver, allowing the receiver to embrace their lost loved one and physically experience their presence. This device was inspired by an invented local legend who is able to sniff out imminent volcano eruptions through a superhuman sense of smell. The design device allows others to experience this ability too, and it's all covered in an issue of The Sun newspaper to stamp its validity as the truth, rather than any kind of possibility or misinterpretation of it as fake news. Imagine that. This is a device using mealworms to spell out messages from spirits that come with a set of action cards to enable the reader to make important decisions, or decide the fate of relationships. Here we have a device for seeking advice from dead designers. Now, through selecting a key and soundtrack that represents the dead designer, the user is able to select their preferred oracle and insert the totem key into the device that, when turned, presents words of wisdom communicated from the designer's spirit. And then here we have the shadow device. This was a participatory piece where visitors were invited to crumple a piece of paper and hang it in front of a candle to see what inadvertent monsters they created. Or was it a communication from their subconscious? So the workshop allowed students to think about design in different terms and identify new scenarios and territory. As Dennis Santichiara's Portale, it talks about strange psychological and social narratives that play through interaction in a consumer-oriented society. So through the suspension of belief, through the whimsical or the satirical, using the power of mock-ups to present fictions of new possible futures that can be understood through experience. Belief is an important factor in how we interpret the design world, which often gets overlooked, I think. You know, is everyone experiencing your work on the same page psychologically? Probably not. In experiencing territory for design and the invention and innovative scenarios that affect our mental and physical connection with our surroundings, the synthesis of paranormal research and design thinking, I think here allows opportunities to investigate these subtle and imaginative links with the environments we occupy. Maya Rubinstein talks here about prosthesis of spirit, aids to thoughts and contemplation. And also Dune writes in reference to speculative objects. When introduced to everyday life, they explore what is and what might be parafunctionality. So between desire and determinism, objects initiate the world of the infraordinary. Now, a project I'm in the process of developing is a series of portable mediumistic props to transform architectural spaces inspired by the Dutch expedition. Now, these objects conceptually colonize the functional possibilities of space. So the user experiences a new narrative wherein space becomes haunted. And at Manchester School of Art, these scrying devices become the portals from which to make contact with the art school ghost, Joan of Art, the name given to Joan Charnley. So Joan was an alumna inspired by an arts education which shaped her life, and she used to study textiles at the art school. And these inventions allow visitors to get to know Joan through her haunted presence. And as visitors explore the levels of the gallery space, they encounter Joan through a series of sonic, sensory, and apparitional experiences. So the spiritophone, a seance trumpet device that utilizes the combination of a bird's nest and runes on Joan's ceramic painted egg that she made when she was a child, scan the ether and pick up EVP, electronic voice phenomena, and enhance this signal into messages from perhaps beyond the veil. The apparitioner, a clairvoyant device that channels personal artifacts into a mystic mist that acts as a pareidolia interface from which to read expressions, conversations, and messages from the present spirit. So pareidolia is a phenomena where our brain sees a meaningful interpretation on a nebulous visual stimulus, so something we can't work out clearly. For example, we may see faces in things, for example, Jesus on a slice of burnt toast, or the Virgin Mary in a cloud formation, etc., etc. So from this recognition of a human presence or archetypal pattern, we then attach our own belief, interpretation, and meaning. We basically make up what we see, but here the design of the nebulous triggers what we see. The psychomatic, a psychic divination device, through gazing into the scrying mirror over Joan's homemade fancy dress moustache, wearing her scent and experiencing periphery light interruptions from a slide of one of her many expeditions, the viewer glimpses her presence. So Joan was known for her botanical knowledge and used to give slide lectures about plants. She also liked dressing up and could only smell three things: cut grass, lavender, and Chanel No. 5. So the aromancer here, a device that diffuses ethereal aromas, in this case, cut grass, by placing images in the small frame and under the spirit lens, the present spirit is able to massage the viewer's emotions. So through stimulating the amygdala and memory through the hippocampus, it's stimulating those brain signals through sensory stimulation. Now, in developing these projects and testing this kind of work, I'm also now working on a series of collaborative projects from a UFO, a platform called Unidentified Facility on Site. Now, it's an international design collaboratory linking designers and artists across kind of global locations. And we took part in a collaborative project called In Search of Practice, where we released a publication called State of Unsettlement during London Design Festival. Now, it documented work produced around a series of workshops in response to Brexit. The slide here shows a day of drifting, presenting and discussing ways to stimulate new dimensional thinking and design practice, an alternative expedition. My presentation was a dowsing activity. Using the elasticated fluorescent psychic lens you can see people wearing, participants were asked to write or draw something they wanted to find, and then use the dowsing rods once tuned to their lens to find it. I think most people found what they were looking for, so the rods must have worked. I wrote Boris on my lens, hoping to have a chat with him about Brexit, but I should have been more specific because I only found Boris the sheep in the local city farm. It was a really interesting day. And interestingly, whether you kind of believe this can work or not, there's a history around dowsing and methods of divination as a tool. You know, sometimes perhaps, you know, it's something I think perhaps for your research. I know Bishop Brian talked about divination as a real thing. Interestingly, the Dutch water board still use it as a way to locate unmapped underground pipes. So could this tool, you know, could it link the metaphysical with the physical experience? Something worth experimenting with. So I'm interested in exploring this territory as a way of investigating new ways of understanding connections we have with space, place, and objects we encounter, and how the real is dealt with, certainly in Western design pedagogy. I think it's time for a change. You know, we often focus on being realistic, thinking within existing realities, the social, political, or economic. This has got us into a situation, I think, of producing endlessly through design. But how about if we become constructively unrealistic, you know, breaking with conventional wisdom and experiment with new ways of thinking? Design has the ability to broadcast stories, and perhaps we need to imagine radically different ways of being. Manzini here talks of the designer's responsibility to contribute to the habitable world, which refers to the environment as a complex existential condition that cannot be reduced to its functional component, rooted in the anthropological and social nature of the human race. And to end on a wonderful quote by Ursula Le Guin, the direction of escape is towards freedom. So what is escapism an accusation of? Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Fabrizio. Yeah, I really enjoyed this talk, and I was happy to see that you mentioned some of the people that have influenced me, like in my personal research, like Darren Brown.
Yes.
To say that he was a regular in the theater I used to run back in London, and he was the one who introduced me to a lot of these concepts, and one of my main motivators to study hypnosis. It was Darren.
Yes.
So that it's great. I think we can jump into questions from the researchers. So I think Amir Mohammed has a long question. So
okay, let me have a read.
Hello.
Okay, he can tell you as well.
I can read it if you
Yes, please read it out. Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to read the question. So yesterday we had this discussion on the spiritual archetypes with Bishop Brian, actually, and we were discussing that these archetypes are situated in the context. For example, we cannot take the deities from Buddhism and bring them to the Western world because they are not the same. They are not perceived the same. So we know that also this practice of design is unavoidably displacing practice. So we make an object, we sell it, through different parts of the world. So my question is how we can approach this para-product design regarding the fact that they are highly contextual. That is my question.
How we can approach it. Well, I suppose it depends on the motivation, doesn't it? I think if we step away from this market-led idea about what a product is, and also depends on how you see the product. So, you know, we talk about experiences. Actually, Bishop Ryan talked about the reason why he enjoys mass is because he receives this kind of this embodiment of the religion and the embodiment of the values. And I think, and that's through objects, isn't it? It's through the design of the architecture, but also the objects that use to carry that message. And I think for designers, I think just being aware of that, you know, that people aren't always on the same page, and something that you design for a particular functional purpose could perhaps be much more imaginative if you thought about its contextual spiritual relevance. You know, how does it relate to people's beliefs, or how could it help people to think differently about their environment? I mean, I like the way actually Bishop Ryan talked about fast tracking. You know, he said you could not follow a religion and you could never get there, you know, in terms of understanding the world around you, or you could adopt a particular belief and it would help you to understand different triggers of how you could get. I mean, possibly, you know, there's a way that design can help facilitate just the understanding of things. And I don't mean that, you know, it's kind of promoting any particular point of view. I mean, just not getting stuck in things like dogmas and kind of confirmation biases, which filter the way we behave, that make us insular and kind of, you know, very kind of narrow-minded. And I think as a culture, we really need to think more openly about things and debate them. Does that kind of answer it, or answer your question?
Yeah. I got my answer, kind of. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
Great. Celeste, please.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I was wondering if you'd been specifically into any churches in and around Manchester, because I'm maybe looking at focusing on some of those, and kind of what was your experience if you have?
What do you mean, just kind of visiting and exploring?
Yeah, looking at it in relation to your work and
Yeah, I mean, there are a few. There was a really interesting, there was an African church in the basement of Hume Hippodrome. I don't know if you know Hume Hippodrome. That was a really interesting place, kind of hidden away in a semi-derelict building. But other churches that I've got, I mean, they were quite open for us just to kind of explore the space, and they had particular objects, but it was kind of like an installation. The space wasn't purpose-built for them. It was an old theatre. Other churches we try to do stuff in, you start talking to them about what you want to do, and it gets to a point where they don't want anything to do with it. So it's kind of more difficult. I think those kind of more informal experiences in churches are much more interesting. I mean, Celeste, have you had any interesting experiences in churches in Manchester?
not necessarily in relation to that, but I go to them for my faith anyway. So I was kind of wondering maybe if I could ask them. I don't know if you ever wanted to go in and I could try and maybe.
Right. I'd love to, yes.
But yeah, I was just thinking if there were any specific ones.
No specific ones, but I'm open to exploring them.
Yeah. Oh, and sorry, I actually have another one if that's okay.
Yeah.
Wondering when and where your exhibition of Joan of Arc will be.
So hopefully sometime soon, once lockdown allows it. Joan's such a lovely character, and a lot of her objects are going to be in the Manchester MMU Special Collection. So when that opens, I'll be exhibiting a series of experiences of Joan. I can let you know in all the time.
Okay, great. Sonny, I think it's more like a comment, but yeah, you can still say.
Right, this is nice. Thinking that designers are shamans who bridge the gap between humans and non-humans. Yes, perhaps they could be, or perhaps they are. I suppose it depends on your practice.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think also what's interesting here, like there's human belief, and then there's non-human things, and you know, if we kind of construct reality around our values, it's very different from perhaps living totally with nature. And I think that's another really interesting area when the natural environment becomes something very much to be inspired by. Not, we can talk of the laws of nature, but it's interesting when things start to be rethought in those terms, away from kind of human ways of organizing things.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why. I was also like listening to your talk, and I remembered an artwork that yesterday I was making reference. Maybe you know this artist. She's escaping my head right now, but she worked with me a couple of times. Basically, it was super interesting. She would go into so-called haunted places, like just empty houses, basically,
Yeah.
and she would put audio recording device, and she will do one recording of just an apparent silence, and then again, and then again and again and again, until at some point she layered, like, I don't know, a couple hundred layers. And when she hit play, you would hear so many things happening suddenly. Like, this audio recording machine became a device to reveal the invisible, no? And it's such a beautiful sound piece. I was really, yeah, blown away.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, there's this whole area of EVP, electronic voice phenomena, where you can record environments and play them back, and people kind of study these and try to hear messages that are kind of hiding in the atmospherics around us. But I mean, just that, I suppose amplifying the things that we can't hear, the things that we can't sense. Sometimes that, I suppose that could be quite scary too. There's all this stuff going on that we don't know is around us, whether that's kind of sound wise or through things like light. I mean, there's so much we can't perceive in terms of just that spectrum of light and infrared, and that's a really interesting thing. I really like work by Neil Harbison and those people that are kind of around that cyborg, that kind of living as a cyborg. And I think that's really interesting, that enhancement of the senses to have a totally different experience of reality.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, now that you mentioned cyborg, and you were mentioning a lot, Bishop Ryan,
yeah,
was with us also yesterday. We had this question based on this idea. I mean, sometimes I think that a really good proof of AI, artificial intelligence, would be to show the capabilities of AI to believe in magic. But in the same way, like the possibility of being possessed, for example. No, like, can technology be possessed, or can they conjure things? I don't know.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, Anthony Dunn's done some really lovely work in this territory, hasn't he, with electronic objects and those relationships with people, that perhaps who's in control? Is it the person that's in control of the robot, or the object that's in control of the person, and who learns from who, and who affects whose behavior? But that's really nice research for the students thinking about this.
Yeah, that's super nice. Perfect. Okay, I mean, Tony says that AirPods make us cyborgs. Well,
AirPods make us cyborgs. Yes, perhaps they do.
Yeah,
I'd like to try those AirPods. Mine don't.
Great. Okay, so I think we can wrap it up here.
Thank you very much.
Fabrizio, so thanks so much.
That's okay.
The name of the university. We really enjoyed this conversation, and I think it can inform some of the projects around, because it brings the paranormal, something that is like ethereal, into design and materiality and objects, and that's what many of the researchers are trying to do now. So I'm sure that they will be very inspired. So thank you so much.
Useful. Great. Lovely. Well, very nice to meet you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.